thank you all for coming, and it's a great privilege, an honour in fact. I know people often say that very glibly, for me to be sitting here this evening with Margaretta. We haven't met. I know her work really well. In fact, this is a copy of the first edition of Tell Them Everything, and the date that's in it is the year it was published by Pluto, and I bought it in what is now News from Nowhere in Liverpool. I read it cover to cover in one evening, and it had a profound effect on me. It had a profound effect on me because I had been working basically as an academic researcher going into prisons since I was 23. I'm working not only with, as people would call it, ordinary prisoners, but also with political prisoners in England. And when I read this book, the one thing that struck me immediately was the absence of women in the discourse around prisons and imprisonment in all of the material that I had read. In fact, it was 2 years later when the first real analysis of women in prison in the UK was written, and that was a tremendous book on Scottish prisons, and that was the very, very first moment that really academics had taken the imprisonment of women seriously. But of course, reading Tell Them Everything was something quite different as well, because for me it was a profound awakening of something that inside that I knew, which was there's a different kind of invisibility here of women in prison. It was an invisibility that was made worse by a patriarchal society and a patriarchal movement that to a large extent had excluded women's voices. And it made absolute sense to me when I read it that there had to be a completely different form and kind of analysis. I also felt that the book at the time when I read it was an incredibly brave book. And the reason I felt that it was an incredibly brave book was because it was critical. It wasn't just accepting. It was absolutely critical, not only of women's absence in the discourse, but also specifically within the Republican movement, women's absence. And it was a really unique moment reading that book. And I also kind of felt that in reading it, I got to know you, Margaretta, as a person. It's a very honest book. It's a very self-reflective book on yourself. And I suppose, in one sense, that's where I'd like to start. I'd like to kind of gear the questions to, and the discussion, if you like, to three elements, and for you to talk as much as you feel is appropriate on each.
Don't tell me that, I overtalk.
Yeah, okay. Well, I